The youth justice system is meant to protect us and to correct the behaviors of young offenders so that they may return to society reformed and productive. However, in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, between the years of 2004 to 2008, this justice system was turned into a factory for producing teenage convicts who would serve months for tiny infractions, all to fill beds at for-profit detention centers. Over 5,000 teen convicts would be victims of the Kids for Cash scandal, with the officials involved receiving over $2.6 million in exchange for helping the centers to enlarge their headcount. To find out how this massive government conspiracy unfolded, and how it managed to stay hidden for so long, stay tuned. And don't forget to hit that bell and subscribe icon below. This is the evil economics of the Kids for Cash scandal. The Kids for Cash scandal would be centered around three government officials: Robert Powell, the Luzerne County Planning Commissioner, and co-owner of Pennsylvania Child Care, would begin negotiations with two judges, Michael Conahan and Mark Ciavarella, to assist him in opening a new privately owned youth detention center. In order to create a need for the new privately owned center, Judge Conahan used his budgetary discretion powers to close down a facility owned by the county in favor of using the one Powell was co-owner of. In exchange for using this facility, the county's tax base was to pay $1.3 million in lease a year, in addition to $285 a night per minor held in these facilities, while the state only allowed for $236.58 in funding. And as a result, the taxpayers in Luzerne County had to make up the difference. The true scandal, however, was not about building leases or nightly rates charged by the privately owned facilities for the incarceration of minors. In the 4 years that the scandal took place, over 5,000 adolescents would be sentenced to overly harsh adjudications for crimes as minor as creating a fake MySpace page for an assistant principal or for stealing pocket change from unlocked cars. The sentences would range from a few weekends in the detention center, the longest sentence lasting 5 years, with increases to sentences in return for bad behavior or escape attempts. This scheme was incredibly profitable, with a young man who had to spend 150 days in lockdown at $285 per night, netting the conspirators over $42,000. The harsh sentencing was carried out almost exclusively on offenders who appeared before Judge Ciavarella and Conahan, but who had not obtained legal counsel before entering the courtroom. These minors and their parents would be asked by court officials if they had obtained counsel, and if they responded no, they were handed a blank form to sign. Those who read the form had a chance of saving themselves. However, those who signed, thinking they were going to be appointed an attorney soon, they would find themselves between a rock and a hard place before long, as the forms that they were signing out were a waiver for the right to attorney, without anybody to protect their rights in the courtroom. Their trials only lasted a few minutes, and they were quickly sentenced to harsh term. The Pennsylvania Conduct Board would receive 4 complaints between the years of 2004 and 2008 about Judge Callahan. However, they would fail to investigate any of them. The Federal Bureau of Investigations, or FBI, would begin their own investigations at some point during this time period, though. The timeline for their investigation has not been released. The FBI investigation appears to have been more focused on the tax evasion aspect of the scandal, rather than an investigation for misconduct. The investigation would begin with the Internal Revenue Service, or IRS, division of the FBI, looking into rent payments the judges were claiming to be receiving for a property they jointly owned in Florida. Ciavarella and Callahan were using the condominium to launder $2.6 million in payments they had been receiving from Robert Powell in exchange for leasing his facilities for the detention of minors and ensuring that they were kept filled with prisoners. Once the tax evasion became clear, the investigation was expanded and would eventually accuse Ciavarella and Callahan removing the funding for the Luzerne County Juvenile Detention Facility effectively shutting the operation down, ordering juveniles to be sent to facilities where the judges had a financial interest, even when the minors' parole officers did not recommend detention, entering a lease agreement with the Pennsylvania Child Care for $1,314,000 annually without disclosing the judge's financial interest in the facility, and adopting procedures which facilitated an increased number of juveniles being sent to facilities where the judges had a financial interest. In February of 2009, charges would be brought against Callahan and Ciavarella, and the two would initially negotiate a plea agreement with the prosecutor in which they would only receive 7 years in prison and be ordered to pay restitution. However, federal judge Edwin M. Kozik would reject the plea bargain, citing failure by the defendants to assist in the investigation against them after they submitted their pleas, and further stated that their lack of remorse and repeated denials of responsibility and statements contradictory to evidence. As a result, the two would be withdrawing their guilty pleas, and more charges would be brought against them, including racketeering, fraud, money laundering, extortion, bribery, and tax violations. Robert Powell would initially claim that he was being extorted by the two judges, and for a short time everybody believed him and he avoided prosecution. But eventually the evidence against him would pile up, and he would eventually plead guilty to failing to report a felony and assisting in tax evasion. Powell would only receive 18 months in exchange for testifying against Ciavarella and Callahan. He would serve his time, and in 2014 he would be ordered to make $4.75 million in restitutions to 2,400 juveniles. Callahan would eventually come to a plea agreement where he agreed to serve 17 and a half years in prison starting in 2011. In June of 2020, his lawyers would cite coronavirus concerns and managed to get him placed under home confinement. In December of 2024, Joe Biden would pardon Callahan along with 1,500 others who were under home confinement. Ciavarella, on the other hand, would not manage to make a plea agreement and would be sentenced to 28 years in prison, where he remains today. 2,400 of the adolescents who were convicted by Ciavarella and Callahan would manage to have their records expunged, 300 of whom joined a class action lawsuit in which the former judges were ordered to pay $106 million in compensatory damages and another $100 million in punitive damages. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this presentation from Evil Economics. We hope that you enjoyed it, and if you haven't already, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. If there's a company, individual, or scandal you'd like us to cover in a future episode, let us know in the comments down below. Thanks again, and we will see you in the next one.